I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty and justice for all.
This is to advise those present at this meeting of the Board of Education of the Pinelands Regional School District in the County of Ocean that adequate notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act. This notice has been posted in the Board of Education office, junior high school, and high school buildings. The notice was also mailed to the Press of Atlantic City and filed with the municipal clerks of Bass River Township, Eagleswood Township, Little Egg Harbor Township, and the Borough of Tuckerton. We're going to do a roll call for attendance. Mrs. McVeigh?
Here.
Mr. Dalio?
Here.
Mr. Rossetti?
Here.
Ms. Chambers?
Here.
Ms. Paklakua?
Here.
Ms. Hannadel?
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett?
Here.
Ms. Palladino? Will be marked absent, and Mr. Williams.
I am here.
All right, sir, the floor is yours. You're ready to take over.
Thank you so much, sir. Sorry about that. I guess our first thing is approval of agenda, approval of the March 16th, 2021 agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion. Oh, second. Karen.
Got it. Thank you, guys. Any questions? All in favor of approving the agenda as presented this evening, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say nay. That motion carries.
Do we have a roll call for the minutes? Any questions?
I need a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Motion.
Second, Pat.
Thank you, Karen and Pat. Gotcha. Are there any questions about the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain, I believe, Mr. Brown on the 9th. So I was not present.
Thank you, sir. Anybody opposed to approval of the minutes, please say nay. All right, that motion carries.
Report of the superintendent's update.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm going to take over and share my screen. Hopefully this works. Let's see. All right. Ms. Frasca, can you see that?
Can see it.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. All right. So as we have been doing each month, we've been highlighting some awesome things that are going on at Pinelands, and I'd like to share a couple things with you and then give my superintendent update. On a second, where's my button? There it is. All right, so in terms of AP exams, I'm just gonna move this over. We can see for the 2020 and 2021 school year, all of the students that had taken an AP exam. You can see on the screen here, there are a lot. These were all of our registrations. You can see some of our courses like AP English, Language Composition, 78. That's amazing. So we have all of the list here, and I can share this with everyone. I'm also going to put this on the board document that we've started, and you can see our average score is over 3, which is amazing. So our teachers and our students are just doing an amazing job with that. There was a total of over $16,000 refunded to 101 students. So those are all students that received a 3 or higher on their AP exam. A total of 110 exams were paid for by the district, over $5,000 for students that receive free or reduced lunch. So this is something that we're definitely proud of. The number of students taking the PSATs is listed here, and this is paid by the district. It's over $12,000. You can see the fall 18 and fall of 19. And I have a little meme at the bottom there. I just want to thank the Board of Education for supporting such endeavors that are so valuable for our students. Next, I want to share something that we retrieved from School Tutor. This is showing the growth and progress that our school district has made. You can see at the bottom of the screen from 2012 to 2019, the upward trend that our district is making in terms of school performance. We are going to continue to grow. Some of the things that we are highlighting in this growth are our language arts scores over the years. Also included in this formula is our attendance. And we know that our chronic absenteeism has definitely gone down over the years. We've made some changes to policy, and that's helped overall. And that does get calculated into the formula. You can see on the right hand of your screen, one of the things that we are going to continue to work on to continue to improve is our math scores. We have now Mr. Baronato working with our math and science department and working with them through PLCs and doing some workshops with them, bringing in some outside consultants. And we are confident that over the years, our math scores are going to continue to improve, as did our language arts scores. So this is definitely something to be proud of. Next, I'm going to just go over a brief update. So the first thing I want to share with you, I shared a few months ago, I had a really great conversation with a parent that had some concerns, and she and I really shared some information together, her ideas, and had a really nice conversation for over an hour. One of the things that came out of that conversation was a clearly defined chain of command and who to go to when you have a problem. So now that we have our new website available, I'm going to be placing on different aspects of that website the chain of command. I want to show you what that looks like. And in full disclosure, if you can see this, I stole this from Barnegat and I liked theirs, and I did ask their superintendent if I can steal it, and he said absolutely. So Ms. Barr helped with putting our information. And I want to make it clear that I have no problem speaking to any parent at any time, but there is a chain of command because it's the most useful way to get information. So for example, if you have a problem that's happening in your child's classroom with grading, the first line of defense would be the teacher. And then if you're not seeing success in that, you would go to a guidance counselor, a vice principal, a principal. All of our supervisors are listed here. There's, if you're having a problem with athletics, matters of discipline and so forth. And you can see all of the different communications that you can have with everyone. And if you go way to the bottom of this document, there's me. There's my office line and my cell phone. So you can always call me, text me. Many parents do. But it's not that I don't want to help. I'm going to have to go back to speak with these people anyway. So it's just easier to go through the chain of command. So I am going to place this on the district website. And once again, thank you to that parent for having a really nice and robust conversation with me about that. We have gotten a reimbursement that I want to let the board know about from Ocean County College for our dual enrollment courses we take with them over $15,000. So that money will go into our pot for next year's dual enrollment courses. So that is going to help with next year's budget for the students that take any dual enrollment courses through Ocean County College. So we were very pleased with that money that we received from them. We are now offering to our students 7 through 12, 4 days in-person learning. It's been going very well. We encourage students to come. I know some of our students that, it's easier to get up and turn a computer on, but we would love to see your face and for you to experience the school life face-to-face. So we're really happy that this is moving forward. I received an email a few days ago from Atlantic Care, and it was specific to educators. So I forwarded that to our school district as well as Little Lake Harbor. Any staff member is required to register through Atlantic Care, and then the separate link is a Google Doc. And once registered, and once a staff member fills out that Google Doc, literally within a day or two, staff members are receiving an appointment to get a vaccination in Atlantic City at the convention center. So it's been very effective. We're really pleased with that. I've gotten great feedback from our staff, thanking me, and I literally just passed it along. So thank you to Atlantic Care, and we're happy that the staff is now having this availability to get vaccinated. Bill 4454 is in the works right now. And basically what it deals with is inclusive curriculum, but not just LGBTQ. It really looks at all factors, including something that has come out in discussion, and it protects the religious organizations as well and someone's religious beliefs. I know this is something that we discussed at length in numerous meetings with our local religious organizations. I have reached out to them about this bill. It has not been finalized yet, but once the details come out, our group, our local religious organization group, numerous members from different churches have agreed to come in the summer to work with us to revise our curriculum. So we're really happy about that, and we want to make sure that we do this through that partnership. We have summer programs that we're planning. Ms. Frasca and I have been working together with the administrative team. We are going to start working with the teachers to plan different types of summer programs. Any student that feels that through COVID they missed any type of instruction or anything that the school typically offers, we are going to create a differentiated program for students this summer using the CARES money that we're receiving from the federal government. So more information will be following with that. And lastly, our next board meeting in April, we will be dealing with many items, including the budget. And we're hoping that more board members can come in person. I know today is completely virtual because of the training we're receiving through school boards immediately following. But we're hoping that more board members, if it's safe for them, can come back in person. We have our students in person now. We have our teachers coming in, and we really want to set that example that, you know, it is safe to be in the building. So I am encouraging more board members, if it's safe for you, to come and do that in person. And I do have one more thing. I know I had reached out to Mr. Williams a couple of times, and I just want to ask him while I have him. I have a sheet where we need it signed for the diplomas for graduation. We have a couple options here. Mr. Williams, you can come in and sign it. I could stop by your house. I drive by there on the way home. Or if you are unable to do that, we will just process the diplomas. And then once they come in, we are going to deliver many, many diplomas to you. And then you'll just have to hand sign them all. So
I
you
will
can,
call you after the meeting.
sure, absolutely. All right, and that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Presentations, Mr. Brown with the budget. Mr. Brown? Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
He can hear you. Mr. Brown, you're muted. There you
Yeah.
go.
I was trying to get that screen back up. So I'm going to share my screen momentarily, but I just wanted to take a moment before we introduce the tentative 21-22 budget for adoption. I want to thank the members of the board's Budget and Finance Committee, Mrs. Paklakua, Mr. Rossetti, Mrs. McVeigh, and Mr. Dalio. The really collaborative process to do the budget. It's a difficult process to engage in, all remote and over Zoom, but I want to thank you guys because that was I thought a really productive discussions or series of discussions we had in formulating the budget that's being presented tonight. And I also want to give a huge thank you to our administrative staff because every administrator was committed to keeping budgets flat when we started this process. And then when we went back to them, when we got deep into it and asked them they had to cut an additional 10% from their budgets, they did that. And I think it's worth noting that they should receive some recognition for being so committed to being responsible with the taxpayer dollars. And I want to thank them for that, their hard work. I think we all understand that we're at a critical crossroads for our students and our community. And as we look to return to in-person instruction here sometimes, or more in-person instruction, we have an obligation to all of our students to make sure they're provided a thorough and efficient education in accordance with state law. But we also have an obligation to our community to spend responsibly and keep taxes in check during these kind of fairly unprecedented times. So the proposed budget accomplishes those objectives. Primarily, this budget keeps all of our existing programs intact for next year. It increases programs for our students who are struggling to get back on track. It increases the commitment to our JAGS, advanced placement, and dual enrollment students next year. And it maintains important athletic and elective programs. Our kids need to get back in person, socializing, competing, and interacting with their peers. And so I would say also very importantly, this budget meets the goals that the budget committee set forth at the beginning of this process. So the committee met 4 times between November and March, and we reviewed in detail revenue forecasts and comparisons to past years. We'll note through this process that we're allowing more than $600,000 in bank cap to expire with the budget that we're putting forward. And what that means is bank cap is tax levy that the board is allowed to collect, but has not. And after it expires, it won't be collected. So that $600,000 is something that the board could have collected to go to 2% over the last several years, has not done yet. And that money now gets returned, will never be collected from the school board, and is now savings to taxpayers in our community. We also reviewed spending in each of the departments per prior years, and I talked about how everybody was down. Of course, we have some notable exceptions there. Payroll's up, benefits are up. Those numbers increase every year. Our special education and transportation budgets increased slightly this year. We took a deep dive on VOTEC tuition and transportation costs and the possibility of Pinelands implementing some VOTEC programs into our curriculum next year or in future years. We discussed a credit review by Moody's Investment Services that the board, the Pinelands is conducting right now. And we discussed shared services and how the savings from shared services have supported the development of new programs over the last several years, including the programs I just mentioned in JAGS, advanced placement, and dual enrollment. So I'm going to dive now into the budget presentation. So hang on a sec while I share my screen. Everybody can see that, right? I'm going to assume I hear no no's. So
I can see it.
thank you.
Looks
Just
good.
a reminder for everybody here, these are all the members of our Board of Education and the municipalities and communities that they represent. A quick snapshot on our facilities. This obviously hasn't changed since last year, but I like to remind everybody that we have, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet that require routine maintenance, upkeep, and improvements on an annual basis. One noticeable trend that's really positive for us, and it impacted us on state aid, we had a big increase in enrollment this year, plus 50 kids on our enrollment to 1015, which is an important benchmark for determining state aid. And the money follows the kids, as they say. So this is important for us. A snapshot of our staff. We have almost 300 bodies that are committed to educating and caring for our students every day. And this budget, a big part of our expenses is accounting for the salaries and benefits of those staff members. This is a snapshot of the total budget. And we're looking at, if you look at this first column here, the general fund, total general fund expenditures of just over $34 million, less anticipated revenues, and most of that is state aid of almost 13 million, leaves a general fund tax levy to be raised of $21 million, just over $21 million. You also see in special revenues, we're anticipating a little over $2 million in federal funds. Whatever amount of federal funds we anticipate, we also plan for the exact amount of appropriations to match. And in debt service this year, we have $3.5 million in debt service obligations. Thankfully, because of the state's generous debt service aid, they're going to contribute $1.25 million to that. The board's responsibility is the balance, $2.3 million. So I wanted to touch on briefly this regional allocation, because this is something that came up. And I know this looks complex on the screen, so I'll just tell you that this is what we get from the state that tells us how we're supposed to allocate that $21 million budget that I showed on the previous screen that we raised from taxpayers. There's a formula that they use to determine how much of the budget each municipality pays. And so when Pinelands was formed back in 1979, at the time, they chose a combination of enrollment and equalized enrollment and equalized value, and a formula that apportions the budget responsibility according to that formula. This is also something that's going to get studied as part of the feasibility study, whether this formula makes the most sense for a regional K-12 district. So I just wanted to share that. I don't think we've shared this the entire snapshot of that in the past. But what's significant here is we see big, fairly significant swings in apportionment when we look at this year compared to last year. Little Egg Harbor and Bass River are picking up a full percentage point of the budget this year, while Tuckerton and Eagleswood will shed a full percentage point or more from their share of the budget this year. These numbers change annually, so this isn't unusual that they change. But, it's worth noting that there's some shift in obligation this year. When we look at the district's various revenue sources, they primarily come from two areas: our local tax levy and state aid. We also get some various funds from other sources. An example would be things that we sell on gov deals, revenue from shared service agreements, or like the revenue that Dr. M just talked about that we got for the dual enrollment classes. So most of our money, about 2/3 of our money, comes from local taxpayers and about 1/3 from state aid. The local revenue breaks down like this. We're looking at 2020, last year, or the current year that we're in, and next year, what we're proposing. This difference in the local tax levy, that's 2%. That's what we would be allowed to go to without having to ask the voters for specific approval. The bank cap, you'll notice last year we used $317,000 in bank cap. This year there's none. That's the there's $600,000 that we could use. That money will expire. And then we outlined some other sources of local revenue to get us to our total portion of local revenue. State aid was a bit of a good news for us this year. I previously mentioned the change in enrollment, the +50 in enrollment we see this year. That really helped us in the equalization aid. We were anticipating cuts in aid, but we're seeing increases in aid. I want to point out that extraordinary aid, which is down here at the bottom, these numbers aren't awarded yet. We'll get the extraordinary aid awards in July, so this number is still estimated, but this is consistent. 500,000 is consistent with what we received last year. No pressure on Mrs. Lichtenwalner to continue to excel in extraordinary aid application. I want to briefly discuss some cost-saving measures. Obviously, we talked about reducing discretionary spending in all departments, but the shared services are also a big driver in our savings every year. We've asked Coleman Frenya Allison, the district's auditor, to do a more in-depth analysis of those shared savings, and that's something that we'll present to the Budget and Finance Committee after it's complete at the end of this month. And now we'll look at the tax levy impact for each of the municipalities. So the number you'll see in the middle of the screen, I'm looking at Little Egg Harbor now, the number in the middle of the screen is the average assessed home value in Little Egg Harbor. So in Little Egg, the average assessed home is a little over $200,000. Last year, your regional school tax was $1,351. This year, the regional school tax would be $1,396, an increase of $45 per year for the average homeowner in Little Egg Harbor. In Tuckerton, the same average homeowner, the average home is worth $215,000, a little over $215,000. Their tax charges will actually go down by $152 a year, and that has a lot to do with the change in apportionment that we discussed earlier on in the presentation. For Eagleswood, news there, average home value just under $250,000. The average homeowner in Eagleswood will see a decrease in their school tax, regional school tax this year of about $96. In Bass River, the most adverse impact, the average home value just over $215,000. They'll see an increase in the regional school tax of $306 per year in the upcoming year. And again, that has a lot to do with the change in apportionment. But I think one of the reasons you see this more significant impact in in Bass River is because the rateable base is a little bit smaller. So there's not as many homes or taxpayers to spread that additional cost across. So that's just a quick overview of how they work, or the impact on taxes this year. And so everybody understands the process. The board's going to vote to approve the preliminary budget, which is on the agenda later on. That budget then goes to the county. We meet with the county to review the budget. After the county approves it, we have a public hearing on the budget in April. And at the public hearing, after the public hearing, once the board adopts that, that becomes the final budget. And now we're ready for 21-22. So that's a brief presentation on next year's budget. Any questions from the Board of Education on that?
Nick, could you post that on our drive so we could take a closer look at it?
The presentation?
Yeah, your slides.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Nick, for the public hearing, I'm thinking one of the other things you might want to just mention is, along with the shared service savings, is the change that we made for the health benefits going into was it the SHIF or the JIF? Right, to help maintain and control, right? Because as you noted, salary and benefits is by far the biggest piece of the budget, right? So we're doing everything we can to control those components. I think that
Absolutely,
would be
Karen.
good
That's
for-
a really great point because, and I'll give you a comparative. In Little Lake Harbor, where we're in state health benefits, we're budgeting, where I think in Pinelands, we're just around $5 million a year in health benefits. In Little Lake Harbor, a number is a little bit higher, but we're anticipating an increase of 8% in Little Lake Harbor. And because we're in the SHIP in Pinelands, we're only anticipating an increase of less than 3%. And when you're talking about 5% of $5 million, that's a quarter of a million dollars a year, right? So it's a really substantial amount of money, and a great point by Ms. Paklakua that the movement to the SHIF has provided year-to-year cost certainty in our health benefits that is really beneficial to the board in building a budget. Make sure that those dollars go where they should go, into programs in the classrooms and things for our staff and students. So excellent point, Ms. Paklakua, and I'll bring that into the more lengthy presentation in April.
Thanks.
No problem. And if there's no other questions, good luck following that, Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Henderson, presentation on high school beautification committee.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. So can you hear me and see my screen okay? Awesome. So thanks for allowing me to come out here and just talk about some of the cool things that we're doing over at the high school. As you know, with the renovation, we pretty much looked at the high school like a blank canvas. And we decided to bring together a beautification committee to talk about ways in which we can honor some of the traditions and some of the things that were there prior to the renovation, but also to talk about new things that we can incorporate into the school. So we put a committee together, and here are the staff members that that are a part of it. And I think it's a good cross section between some of the newer staff members and some of the veteran staff members that have been in for a while that can really talk to that tradition and that part of what Pinelands has always been. So I made a mistake of getting a Cricut and then became obsessed with it. So we ended up putting a bunch of positive quotes and inspirational sayings throughout the entire building. They're in the bathrooms, they're in the hallways, anywhere, any hallway you turn down, you're going to see one of these. And as you can see, we just went Cricut crazy. So it's been fun, and I hear a lot of positive comments from the
I
students.
love this.
So then again, to honor some of the older traditions, we wanted to put up some pictures that even if you're an alumni and you come back to the school, you might recognize some of these pictures that were taken. So we started these, and this is in the Commons just as you're entering that first grade, the first floor wing. But we'd like to continue it throughout the building. Again, just never forget where we came from, right? This is our military wall of honor. I'm sure if you've been over at the high school, you've seen this painting. Erica Mack is a local artist, and she did an incredible job of painting that painting. There's a flag also there that had been there prior to the renovations, they told me. So the committee insisted that get back up on the wall. And what we're planning on doing is right on this part of the wall, we're going to be building shadow boxes, 5 each for each branch of the military. And we're going to be printing out the names of not only students that have served in the military, but who choose to serve moving forward. That will just continue to grow, and a great way to recognize those students who decide to serve in our armed forces. Hopefully you've seen our planters. Our hope, we thanks to NutriServe, we were able to get enough plants to fill all of our planters up. And I promise you, board members, that none of these plants will hit the ceiling. We made a concerted effort to make sure that we picked the right kind of plants that are really going to make that commons area just pop. As you've seen in our media center, this is the Starry Night Vincent van Gogh, but they incorporated Tuckerton Seaport. So again, that's just another local artist that wanted to put that together for us. And I think it really just makes our media center. So right now we're working on, these are all pennants and that represent colleges and universities that our staff members have attended. So our plan moving forward is to have the staff members' names printed on vinyl and placed underneath each one of those colleges and universities. And obviously this will be a growing, changing wall. But I think it's a great way to just show our kids where our staff members came from, right? And so open up those conversations, maybe for those students who may or want to go to that college or university and have that kind of dialogue. So really push that. And we are planning on doing the same thing for seniors who have committed to certain colleges or universities right outside the guidance office. We're going to print the college or university's pennant that they are choosing to go to, and then we're going to place their names under it as well. Again, just to celebrate the accomplishment they've made, that, you know, they've made it through their senior year, and this is what their future will hold for them. And that's something that will change out each year. This is the Honor Society wall, and we're planning on, again, printing out vinyl names of all the students who have been inducted into all of these different societies. In order to honor past traditions, I'd like to get a picture of what the wall had looked like prior, and then print that picture out in a big poster, frame it, and stick it on that wall as well. So again, to say, this is where we were, and this is where we're headed. So I think that's going to be that's going to look nice once it comes to life. So what's next? So our committee is committed to the following projects. One is a video wall. We're really excited about this. There's 4 55-inch TVs that are going to come together in the Commons to create one image. And we're going to be able to throw things up there like, you know, after the students go to the prom, they'll have pictures. After sporting events, after drama productions, we could throw pictures up there on that wall to just display to the entire school, to show what's going on in the school. I mentioned the shadow boxes. We were planning on having outdoor dining right outside the cafeteria. We were able to get a cement slab poured. Thank you, Nick Brown, in order for us to have our students have the opportunity to eat outside. And right now we have 3 picnic benches out there, and our wood shop teacher is working with his students to create more benches for our students to go outside and enjoy their lunches. Street art, Mrs. Porner is getting some students organized together to do some street art up on the 3rd floor. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's been difficult to do, but she's certainly committed to getting that done at some point. Our School, Our Story. So this is pretty cool. Outside the media center in the Commons, from one side of the media center to the other, there's a line that goes across. And that's going to be essentially a timeline. And what we're going to do is from September all the way to June, we're going to start to print vinyl pictures of things that are going on in the school, students who are involved in different activities, and we're going to place it along that timeline. So at the end of the year, you'll have a full picture from September to June of all the things that our kids have been able to get involved with. And then at the end of the year, we pull the vinyls down and we start fresh for the next year. As Nick mentioned, you know, we have a lot of clubs and activities, and I said we had a meeting last week, or this week rather, with our students. And one of the messages I said to them is I really would hope that our 215 bus home is empty. Why? Because I want you here. I want you involved in clubs, activities, sports. So we're going to create a wall in the Commons, recognizing all the different clubs that we have, and hopefully spark that interest in the students to get out there and join. And future steps is what I had mentioned in regards to the students who are being accepted into different colleges and universities. We're going to recognize them outside the guidance office. So that's it. That's the committee. And thanks again for letting me present.
Thanks.
Any questions for Mr. Henderson?
Very nice. Thank you.
Great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, seeing nothing more, Mr. Henderson, thank you so much. Board forum, anyone from the board have anything at this time?
I have something, I'm not sure, I just wanted to remind everybody that they have a voice in the school notes. There is an article about our K-12 reorganization. I was going to read it, but it is really not really time, but basically It's this story where Senator Sweeney came to our school and talked to us for 2 hours to Bass River, Tuckerton, and everyone, board members, staff members, etc., and left the meeting feeling like we were doing such a great job because to quote him, it says, it's the way regionalization is supposed to work. There's no, not a lot of fear about loss of identity, home rule, job losses. They're in it to make it the right thing for the school. And, but the article's in school notes, so you should definitely check it out.
Thank you, Ms. Hannadale. Anyone else? There are no one. Let's move on to new business. School ethics disclosures. We need to get them in. Next item, girls flag football.
Mr. Williams, if you don't mind, I just wanted to let the board know that the school ethics disclosure looks a little different this year. The form's been updated. If you're having any issues with the form, just reach out to me and we'll help you get it completed. But I think you'll find it easier to use, but there have been issues reported from around the state. So if you're having any issues, please let me know and I'll help you get it done.
At least
Thank
they
you, sir.
really simplified it.
Can I just add something about that? And maybe for our new board members that are filling it out for the first time, you have to download it first before you can submit it.
Mhm.
Because the button will not be highlighted until you download it yourself, and then it allows you to submit the form, just so they're aware of that.
It's much easier than it used to be.
Thank you. Girls flag football, questions and concerns regarding that. My first question is, when did we put in for a grant?
What?
So I think, I know Mrs. Chambers had asked about this and we had discussed this in an email thread back and forth with the board, but I'm going to let Will answer any of the questions that Ms. Chambers had.
Thank you.
So I heard Mr. Williams, and I believe you asked why I put in for it now. It's a
No, when was this put in for? I had no clue.
okay. It was after the last meeting, but before this meeting, and it's pending you guys approving it. It's from money that's donated by Nike and the New York Giants. Ms. Chambers, what questions did you have?
You're on mute, Pat.
Yeah, hold on, I hit the wrong button. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, all my apps are going to start firing up because I just hit the wrong button. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I did. I submitted back some questions I had. First of all, I'm under the impression that it's a $40,000 startup fee for 8 schools to get involved in this. Yes.
It was up to 60,000. That was promised from the New York Giants for this year, and it is 8 schools right now. Yes.
Okay. So that boils down to about 5,000 per school, correct?
Right now it's 7,500.
Okay, so then it's more than 40K.
It's 60.
Oh, okay, 60. Okay. Now that money, that $7,500, the teams, and there's 8 teams that I guess they're going to be participating.
Yes.
Okay. That money is supposed to be divided up for what?
The money there's uniforms provided by Nike, so it's not necessary for that. The money will go for anything that we need it to go for. We're going to need it for transportation, officials, equipment like flags and balls that they will use specifically for that girls flag football team, a coaching stipend or stipends. If it's not covered under our insurance, we would have to purchase other insurance, although it probably would be under the same insurance as our other clubs and athletics, but that's what the money would be donated for.
Okay. And the $7,500 is going to cover all that?
Yes.
And, okay. Really? I mean, a lot of these things, transportation was one of the questions I asked. And that's going to depend, I would think, on where the schools are located, the other 7 schools,
Mhm.
And transportation to and from there.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be a big chunk, maybe taken out of that 7,500.
Yeah.
Equipment, I'm sure we've got some already that can be used. The coaching stipend, I'm not sure. I guess that has to go through the union or whatever. So that's going to eat up another chunk. And as far as insurance and liability, where do we stand on that? Is that going to be an issue?
Chambers, if you don't mind, I'd say that typically when we look at whether or not an activity is covered by the district's insurance, all board-sponsored activities are covered through our policy through NJSIG. And I think that's why the board's approval of the grant is an important step.
All right. As far as the companies donating the money, has there been any talk about them continuing this after this year or after this season?
So Nike has not said that they will commit after this season yet, but the Giants have committed for 2 years.
Good.
So will we need to pick up anything? We probably wouldn't know. As far as the cost, do we need to budget for this? I don't know if the budget committee talked about this.
I would have to, if anything like that happened, I would have to take it out of the existing budget for athletics, if that ever came up, and or for transportation that we use for athletics, if that was it. But I'm fairly certain that the $7,500 that they're giving us this year will cover this season, and that's what it's designed for.
Okay, and it looks like a short season, a couple months. That's
7
gonna
weeks, 7 weeks, 1 game a week. Half those games will be home, so it's probably 3 or 4 trips away, and probably 4 hours a trip. So yeah, we'll make it work.
Okay, and how many students do we have that are interested, Will?
I emailed all of the students from every grade from 9 through 12, and we had over 40 respond, saying that they were interested. Now that doesn't mean they're all going to play because it's not an NJSI sanctioned activity yet, but it could come down the pike. They would be allowed to play their spring sport as well as play flag football as long as they worked it out with their coaches. I believe we're going to have a lot of our practices at night and our games in the evening or on the weekends. So it's just a matter of can they fit that into their existing schedule. And, you know, I think we'll probably keep a maximum of 25 player, between 15 and 25.
Okay, and is this for girls only or is it co-ed?
Girls.
Is that going to be a problem through any of gender equality, equity, whatever, NJSIA, Title IX, whatever?
No.
Okay.
Is football?
Well, it doesn't say boys football and girls can.
Girls can play football.
Yeah.
Boys
Yeah.
can play flag football if in this league.
Don't.
Oh, we have had.
Yeah, we've had girls and we've had girls on the wrestling team too.
We have the one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
So
Will,
I had a
my
question
question,
too.
I think you've hit on it. Do you have any concerns that this would, based on the timing of the season, especially this year, how everything has changed, that it would impact our other sports programs? But I think you said this would be nights and weekends. Like I'm thinking, does this impact our softball team? Or does this impact track?
Ms. Cool. I don't think that it will impact our existing programs in the spring right now because they could do both. But certainly at some point, if we continued this and it took off as an NJSI sanctioned sport, obviously any new sport that we would consider adding would affect our other sports that we already offer. And that's just the climate of where we are. Obviously you guys are aware that you've approved volleyball most recently for the boys and the girls. And that has just become our most popular sport for the girls. And that's where athletics is going. It's looking in new directions. Esports is another thing that's coming up and extremely popular. So some of the sports that have been around for a while are less popular with students. We need to find other things for them to do. This was an opportunity for us to try something that at this time will cost us nothing or very little. So I thought it was something worth approaching with you.
Good, thank you.
Can I ask, Will, is there, are they, I think it's amazing. I think it's fabulous. It's wonderful. Can I play? But I'm wondering, is there any television that they're asking for? Any broadcast of the games that they're asking for? I'm just wondering what will make Nike, I assume Nike will do it again if it's successful. I'm just wondering if there's some buy-in on anything like that.
They haven't said anything to us about that yet. From their end, I'm sure they will want to use some data from us for Nike and for the NFL, for the Giants. The Jets have sponsored a league in North Jersey, so the Giants can't. Our league is considered Central Jersey right now. The teams that are in it are mostly Monmouth County, but Jackson, Liberty, and Jackson Memorial are in. And we, because it was an opportunity in the Shore Conference, I said we might be interested pending board approval. Obviously, a lot of people on the screen would rather have the Eagles sponsor it. It's the Giants sponsoring it right now. So
Thank you.
Hey, Will, thanks a lot for doing this. I know it's a little bit more work and one more thing for you to do. I appreciate your can-do attitude, and I think it's a wonderful thing, even if we do have to root for Giants.
Hey, Will, did you, when you were bringing this together, did you reach out to the Giants organization and Nike asking for support?
I did not, Mr. Dalio. Actually, it was set up by the head football coach, Steve Antonucci at Middletown South, and he kind of got the ball rolling for it. And then he just they asked every school in the Shore Conference, and we were one of the first 8 just to say we might be interested.
Okay, thank you.
I missed one of Kim's questions. Was the question, do we have to advertise for the Giants? Is that what you asked or no?
No, I just wondered if they were going to ask for any kind of television for the girls to be
Oh, okay.
televised or any kind of, you know what I mean? Anything that would make
okay.
it successful in their brains.
Okay, well, will we have to advertise Giants and Nike being part of this? I mean, with banners or something in the stadium? I don't know.
I'm not sure about that yet. That's a possibility. They haven't said that yet.
Okay.
Or I guess it could be on their uniform.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's going to be a Nike swoosh on the uniforms.
Yeah.
Nike, yes. Giants, no.
There's not a Giants logo on uniform. We could design our uniform.
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr. Sunderman. We move on to C, old business. Anybody have anything for old business? Anything for old business? Hearing no one. Item D, Marianne Friedman, representative, New Jersey School Board, will host a board member workshop at the conclusion of tonight's board meeting. Residents forum, agenda items only. Anyone from the community?
I do not have anyone on call right now.
As we have in the past, we'll wait a few minutes for the delay of the live stream broadcast to allow members of the public. As a reminder, the call-in number for public comment is available through the live stream. You should see it displayed on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I guess we should move on to committee reports, and if anyone comes on, you'll let us know.
Yes, sir.
Committee reports. I have a motion to approve the instructional items listed A1 through A3. Can I have a motion?
Motion, Karen?
Second that.
Any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
In regards to policy 6511, the direct deposit, do we need to, since we're changing a policy, do we need to do a first and second reading?
If it's a minor amendment, we do not.
And I'll
Thank you.
address that. This particular policy, this is the annual adoption of the direct deposit policy that requires the policy is reviewed and adopted annually.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Roll call vote, please, Mr. Brown.
Yep. Just taking some notes there. Hang on. Okay. Mrs. McVeigh,
Yes.
Mr. Dalio,
Yes.
Mr. Rossetti,
Yes.
Ms. Chambers,
Yes.
Ms. Paklakua,
Yes.
Ms. Palladino. I'm sorry, Ms. Palladino is absent today. Ms. Hannadel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
That motion carries.
Under personnel, I have a motion for items B1 through B14.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Will, thank you for that update on the program. It was very helpful. I really appreciate you answering our questions. I do have a question on number 13, or maybe some clarification. Melissa, could you tell us the lead counselor positions, what actually is their role or their job? What will they be providing as lead counselors?
So Pat, I believe this is through school-based. I didn't have chance to research this because it wasn't asked within the Q&A. Maybe Gina, if you know a little bit more about this, or Karen Kenny, because I see that it's Marla and Sue. I'm not really certain of what
I'll hop in. So I spoke to Dr. McCooley and Mrs. Frasca, and what this is in the spring, we possibly may have NJSLA testing. And I'm the district test coordinator, and we also have AP testing. And I actually am pending surgery and may be out for some medical time. So this is in the event something happens and I'm not there, that we have a backup.
My apologies, Karen. You did speak with us about this. There's a lot going on right now.
Yes, no problem.
Thanks, because we've done that before, and I apologize. I overlooked that for the
Yeah,
Q&A.
no problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, roll call vote. Mrs. McVeigh,
Yes.
Mr. Dalio,
Yes.
Mr. Rossetti,
Yes.
Ms. Chambers,
Yes.
Ms. Pakakua,
Yes.
Ms. Hannadel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on to operations, just item C1. Do we have a motion for the obsolete equipment?
Motion.
Second.
Are there any questions? Roll call vote, Mr. Brown.
Mrs. McVeigh,
Yes.
Mr. Dalio,
Yes.
Mr. Rossetti,
Yes.
Ms. Chambers,
Yes.
Ms. Pakakua,
Yes.
Ms. Hannadel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes, I'm sorry.
The motion carries.
Under D, report of the board secretary. Do we have a motion for D1 through D11?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions?
I do have a question. Item 8 for the contract agreements. B, I'm just looking at the list. Is that a complete list or is that an add-on? It looks,
These would be new since the last meeting.
okay. That makes more sense then. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? All right, roll call vote. Mrs. McVeigh,
Hey, can I ask a quick question? Sorry, what's going on with the George Street? I thought that was not happening. The Playhouse, or is it being moved?
Kim, if you read, I don't know, someone's are not muted and there's a lot of background noise. So Kim, if you look at it, it's a video that they're using for health class. It's
So
not
it's totally separate. It's
Yeah,
not, it's not the other one. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
I wasn't sure.
right, correct.
any other questions on D1 through D11? All right, roll call vote, Mrs. McVeigh.
I vote yes, with the proviso that if there are any bills that pertain to shared service agreements, I will abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dalio,
Yes.
Mr. Rossetti,
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett,
Yes.
Ms. Paklakua,
Yes.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes, but Nick, I am going to abstain on PO 2101339 this evening. Thank you.
No problem. Ms. Hannadel
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Residents Forum, general topics. Anyone from the public?
Mr. Williams and whoever Phil is on this, I know I got an email from Miss O'Hara. She was trying to do a public comment tonight, so I'm not sure if this is her phone number. No one answered that, but she also was trying to access the Zoom link. We might just want to give her a minute.
Okay.
There was a phone number that joined at the very beginning of this meeting. I didn't know who it was. I messaged them on here, but they didn't reply and then they left. So I don't know
Yeah,
if that was her
so
or not.
I don't think it's her. She said she originally thought the meeting was tomorrow night, but I was emailing back and forth with her that she could hop on the Zoom or the phone call. So I'm not sure if she is still even trying, but we could just give her maybe like another 30 seconds or a minute. And then I'll remind her that she can always write her statement and we can read it at the board meeting too.
Perfect. Thank you.
I haven't heard back from her, so we can most likely move on.
Anybody else in there, Phil?
No, sir, I got nobody.
Okay, moving on to board forum. Mr. Dalio?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank again the administration for all their hard work. The presentations by Troy, I think that was really great what you're doing inside there, inside the school. I was very impressed by all the presenters. And Nick and the committee, this is the committee too. I found it was a pleasure on the budget and finance committee. It was a pleasure working with all of you. I thought it was very I thought it was very thought-provoking. A lot of great questions were asked, a lot of input, great input by all the members. And again, Nick and your staff, thank you very much for all that you do for our schools. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Dalio.
Ms. Hannadel?
Yes, thanks, Tommy. Yeah, thanks to ditto on what Mr. Dalio said. I also want to say congratulations to the high school yearbook committee on receiving first place and to the advisors. And thanks to School Base for their virtual job fair and their person in support for lunch and virtual services. Congrats to the JAG students for continuing their hard work through COVID. And a huge thank you to Ocean Inc. for the laptops that they'll get to keep. That's amazing. All the volleyball donations, the scholarships, thanks Jess. And the college acceptance is really impressive, Miss Karen Kenny. And someone's going to Wales to go to college. That was very impressive. And I just didn't hear anything about the Olympics special party, so I didn't know how that went. The dance party. But I didn't hear about that. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Hannadel. Mr. Chambers?
Just adding to what's been said already, Gina and whoever worked with you on the new website, it looks great. I know you mentioned it at the last meeting and then it was rolled out. So we've had a chance to really look at it and peruse through it. So nice job to you and everyone that's helped make that happen. It looks very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chambers.
Thank you, Mrs. Chambers. Mrs. Pakalakua?
Yeah, just same as everyone else. Thank you for your hard work for the admin updates tonight. It's great to get those. Thanks for your hard work, and I'm so glad that our students are back in school learning for 4 days a week. I think that's something really to be proud of for the admin team as well as our staff to be able to make that happen. Thank you to everyone for the donations. Thanks for our volunteers that we have coming in. And also I noticed on the new hire list, it's great to see some of our alumni coming back and supporting our community. So welcome back to those, and thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Pakalakua. Ms. McKay?
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep my comment short since it looks like we have another whole meeting to attend. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Williams for becoming our new board president. I look forward to a very productive year. I'd like to thank Mr. Eric Shore for his extra work that he does to make sure he can televise home matches and meets to spectators and parents who aren't able to attend in person. He really goes above and beyond, and he should get a shout out for that. I'd also like to thank school-based youth services who provide important services to our students under normal conditions, but they are really doing an amazing job during this time of COVID when there are so many kids that are struggling with learning and depression and etc. So major kudos to them. Also to Nick and his team on the budget. I know he didn't get everything that he asked for, but his attitude through the entire process was phenomenal. And I'm glad to see that the entire board supported that budget. And one last quick shout out to Will again for the girls flag football program. What a great idea. The more active we can keep our kids, and the more we can keep up with what they want to do today, not get them stuck in a old way of providing sports, I think is great. And I want to give him some kudos. That's all I got, guys.
Thank you, Mrs. McVeigh. Mr. Bartlett?
Yeah, just again, thanks for the presentations. Enjoyed seeing that. Mr. Brown on the budget, getting that put together was very insightful. And again, shout out to Mr. Will Sunderman for getting that, having your ear to the ground, and of course, coach from up north getting us in on that. That's really great. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Rossetti?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to the teachers, the staff, the administration, everybody involved in getting our students back to 4 days a week. That's great. Love seeing the students in school learning. Thank you for the presentations, Mr. Henderson. That was awesome. I was blown away by everything that's going on in the school. It looks fantastic. Congratulations, Mr. Williams, board president. Also wanted to say thank you, Dr. McCooley, for the presentation on letting us know how great Pinelands is doing. And congratulations to our volleyball and our wrestling teams that won tonight. Go Cats.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. I would like to echo what all my fellow board members have stated here in our board forum, and thank everyone for all their hard work and dedication. Pinelands Regional has been under a large amount of stress and duress since Hurricane Sandy. A lot of other towns have dealt with COVID and all this. We have not had a break since Sandy. We went from Sandy to the construction debacle to now COVID. And unfortunately, some of our toughest challenges are still ahead of us. One of them being the bill that was signed into law for the recreational use of marijuana. all the things we have taught our children all along, all the things that we have on the signs out there. Now all those things are going away. However, us as board members, our administration, our administrators have to come up with a way to deal with this. We've been given no guidance, no idea how to proceed with this. But ladies and gentlemen, our staff could take advantage of this situation. I feel horrific for every community, whether it's schools, law enforcement, firefighters, first aid, any public entity that is going to have to figure its way out through these issues coming up. And I would hope that sooner than later, there is some guidance. And I, for one board member, would really hope that all of us would want to stay ahead of the curve on this and know exactly what we are or are not responsible for. Thank you all so much for your time. That is it for me.
Mr. President, is there any way we could get a short recess before we go into this presentation, maybe adjourn the meeting and restart here in a second?
Yes, sir. I have a motion to close our regular business meeting and go into our workshop meeting.
Motion.
Second.
I could interject. I believe the meeting has to stay open.
Okay.
It's been advertised as a board work session, so the members are free. Let's just call it a 5-10 minute recess. Does that work for everybody? And then we'll just convene back. We'll leave the live stream on just so we comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. And when we come back, Ms. Friedman will give us her presentation. After the completion of that presentation, we'll adjourn the meeting for the public at that time.
So
Thanks,
Nick,
guys.
we're saying a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 7:35. 7:35.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank
Mr.
you. Good night.
Domino, thank you.
Screen. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me in to facilitate your ethics discussion for school officials. And I just, so that I let you know ahead of time, I have the email all ready to go to the board president, the vice president, the superintendent, and the business administrator with a PDF of this PowerPoint. So you'll have it for your files. I have a couple of articles from school board notes that answer commonly asked questions about ethics. And I also have the acknowledgement, the school board members' acknowledgement of having received this ethics presentation. And I'm going to ask you to send it to everybody else. And then once the board members get it, you can print your name on it, sign it, and today's date is the 16th. And you can give that to Mr. Brown when you see him next or at your next board meeting in person so that he can hold it with his CUSAC records. Okay, I hope everybody is well and all your families are well. And let's get moving because I'm sure the last thing you want to do is be here any longer than you need to be. So the School Ethics Act became effective in 1992, and what it stated was that the legislature felt that it was essential that the conduct of members of local boards of education and local administrators hold the respect and the confidence of the people, and that these board members and administrators have to avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression that the public trust is being violated. After that, they also wanted to make sure that board members and school administrators would have the benefit of specific standards that would guide their conduct and some form of disciplinary mechanism to ensure the uniform maintenance of those standards being met. And the School Ethics Act and the Code of Ethics applies to not only school board members, but local charter school trustees and administrators as well. So you're probably aware that CUSAC, which is the New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum, which is the monitoring system for all school districts, all public schools in the state, has a governance indicator and that has to do with ethics. And this is to ensure transparency and ethical conduct of Board of Education members. So I know you talked about your disclosure statements before. Anybody who was sworn in January would have needed to complete these within 30 days. Any existing board members already would need to complete theirs by April 30th. And I know Mr. Brand said that if anybody has any trouble, they did change the format a little bit this year. They were late in getting out the links. We at school boards have to do these also. I fill out those personal and financial disclosure forms as well. And I was surprised at how late they came out because they usually come out the beginning of February, but they came out a little bit later. They are somewhat easy to use, but it does look a little bit different this year. So please make sure that you get those done. And I'm sure that if you're kind of lagging on that, Mr. Brown will be in touch with you to make sure that those get done. That you have an annual discussion of the School Ethics Act, which we're doing tonight. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Yes.
Or maybe I should just ask Mr. Brown later in regards to the financial, what you just talked about.
Okay.
Is that?
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
I'm sorry, it's Ray Bartlett.
Oh, okay. I can't see all of you, so I'm only seeing four people, but that's okay.
So is that just, I'm pretty sure I saw an email that came through and maybe somebody could, I tried to fill that out and I did have some questions, so I could just direct them to Nick Brown as I fill that out.
So
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett, it's Melissa as well. Yes, you can contact Mr. Brown, or even Cindy Barton is the one that sent that out to you. She can help you either one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what those financial disclosure forms ask you is where income is coming into your household. So anybody who lives in your household, you're going to have to declare where the money comes from, not how much money is being made by any individual, but where sources of income come from that are from people who reside in your family, in your household. So it's not an actual financial disclosure statement where it's not like the IRS where you have to declare the amount of money that you're making.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The annual discussion of School Ethics Act, which is what we're doing tonight, and I'm sure Mr. Brown will put this in in your board minutes. And then any board member who has been found to be in violation of the School Ethics Act or administrator who's been found to be in violation of the School Ethics Act has to be listed when in your CUSAC review. So the School Ethics Act established the School Ethics Commission, which is for tonight's purposes is the SEC as opposed to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Code of Ethics, which came about 2001 in 9 years after the School Ethics Act was established. Conflicts of interest. The conflicts of interest, it's important for folks to understand, these are not punishments. These are put into effect to protect individual board members who may have a conflict of interest, to protect the board, and to protect the district. And then disclosure statements, which we just talked about, the personal, relative, and financial disclosure statements, and then training requirements for board members, because there are training requirements that board members will need to, requirements that will need to be met. So if you were in your first year of your first term, a term is a 3-year term, you would need to take new board member orientation this year. And it's also called Governance 1 or NBMO, New Board Member Orientation. And what it does is provide you with the skills and knowledge that are necessary to serve as a board member. It also talks about CUSAC, which is the Quality Single Accountability Continuum that I just spoke about, the 5 areas of effectiveness and how boards can be rated and districts can be rated highly effective. It also gives you training on the Chief School Administrator's evaluation process. And that's supposed to happen within 6 months of becoming a new board member. And then in years 2 and 3 of your first term, you would take Governance 2 and Governance 3. Gov 2 is school finance, that you would take in your second year. Gov 3 you would take in your third year, and that's about student achievement. And then any reelected year or any reappointed year, you would take Governance 4. And this is advanced training that has to do with legal updates on HIB and on any other relevant school law that has taken place over the past 3 years, because you would have taken it, you would have gotten law information, legal information in your first year as well. And then, as I said, any newly elected, reappointed, you would get also your harassment, intimidation, and bullying information, the district and the board's responsibilities. That comes in Gov 1 and then also in Gov 4. And then those are really only required once. You get your initial training in 4 and then any updates in Gov 1, I'm sorry, initial training in Gov 1 and then any updates in Gov 4. So the School Ethics Commission, again, the SEC, is comprised of 9 members. They're appointed by the governor for a 3-year term. There can only be 5 members from any one political party. That's the maximum number from one political party. There are 2 school administrators, 5 non-school officials, and 2 school board members. And right now we have a complement of 6 members of the SEC. So there are 3 vacancies at this point. So what does the SEC do for you as a board? They provide advisory opinions and they work to adjudicate school ethics complaints. So an advisory opinion, only a school official, so a board member or a board administrator, school administrator can request an advisory opinion. And that's to determine, if anything that's upcoming, anything that's a proposed activity, something that might happen would constitute a violation of the act. So for instance, when I was elected to my board back in the late 90s, another woman who ran at the same time as I did, we had April elections. And as you know, if you're running for your township council, you usually have to submit your petition in June. So we were sworn in May, and Paula came to us and said, my husband's thinking of running for the town council. If he's elected, will that pose any conflicts of interest for me as a board member? We asked our board attorney to ask for an advisory opinion. And within about 6 weeks, we got a notification back from them saying that there were certain things that she would be conflicted in if he participated from a township committee perspective, or if he didn't participate, she could participate in. So the advisory opinions are very helpful because they do come back and let you know pretty much what they would consider to be a violation if the proposed activity came to be, and what wouldn't be considered to be a violation, again, if that proposed activity came to be. The ethics complaint, these can be filed by anybody. somebody who comes in who's on a Zoom meeting with you. If they feel that you've violated the code of ethics, they can file an ethics complaint against you. So these can be filed by anybody, and this is something that has already taken place. It has to be within 180 days of that situation taking place, but anybody can file an ethics complaint. These take a little bit longer to be resolved by the SEC. It can take a couple of months, and there have been some cases where it's taken even longer than that. And in fact, in some cases, it's taken so long that the board member has been off the board before there has been a decision made by the SEC, which then there's a process that it has to go to the Commissioner of Education for the final result. So the penalties that are recommended by the SEC, and again, these are recommended when they feel that there's been a violation of the act, and they're recommended to the commissioner because only the commissioner can give out a penalty, can hand down a penalty, or a reprimand, a censure, a suspension, or a removal. And the SEC does make the recommendation to the commissioner, and then the commissioner gives the final agency decision. And if there is an appeal, it's heard by the appellate division. So in 2020, these were the cases considered by the SEC. There were 21 advisory opinions drafted, but only one was made public. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. There were 22 cases that were made, that were submitted to the SEC for mandatory training violations. There were 8 removals of board members. So the SEC is getting very, very careful and serious about removing people for mandatory training violations. We send out notices to board members when they have something when they have a required mandatory training coming up in that year. And we send those usually to the business administrator and to the individual. Then the individual and the BA will get repeated emails from us or notifications from NJSBA if they haven't taken it yet. So there are reminders throughout the year. And if there's a final push like in September, October, and they usually give you until the end of December, but obviously the training is best if you can take it as soon as possible, because then you can benefit from that training and so can your board for that entire year. But 8 members were removed, 4 were given 30-day suspensions each, and then 10 were reprimanded. There were 28 school ethics violation complaints, 24 were dismissed, and 4 cases were recommended to the commissioner, and we'll be discussing those. And some of those we don't have a final decision from the commissioner on either yet. So this was the only advisory opinion that was made public in 2020. There was a superintendent whose sister-in-law, a lunch aide in the district who was hired before the superintendent was selected by the principals as a finalist for a secretarial position. So the lunch aide was looking for a promotion within the district, applied for the position of secretary, and principals put her through the interview process as the finalist. As most of you know, the superintendent is the only person who can make a recommendation for somebody to be hired or promoted in the district. The only person that will come to you without a recommendation of the superintendent is a superintendent's position. So if your superintendent was retiring or was leaving, then the board would go through a search and would do the recommendation themselves for the next superintendent. Everything else comes to you with the recommendation of the superintendent. So the superintendent asked the School Ethics Commission if it was fair to prohibit a qualified and vetted employee by other people, by other administrators, to move into another role only because he was her brother-in-law. And so the SEC came back and said, yes, that would be a violation if he promoted or recommended the sister-in-law for a promotion. And the public could reasonably perceive that this was securing unwarranted privileges or an advantage of employment for an other, and would leave a justifiable impression that the public trust was being violated. The superintendent also needed to recuse himself from any discussion on his sister-in-law's employment as a lunch aide. So anything that would have to do with his sister-in-law, he would not be able to be a part of. And they further went on to say that the sister-in-law was free to pursue positions in other districts or could pursue promotion positions within the district once the superintendent was not serving as the superintendent any longer. So that was something that they felt was important enough and might have far-reaching impact to be able to make public. So I'm going to talk about the 10 tenets of the Code of Ethics now, and please let me know if you have any questions. So the top part that's larger is the actual tenet itself. I'm going to read those, and then the standards underneath that section that says standards, that's the evidence that somebody would have to provide to the SEC in defense of filing an ethics complaint about somebody against that particular tenet. So the first is, I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. So this is about not bending the rules, not asking others to bend the rules, and not doing anything as an individual that could compromise the legal guidelines of the board. And then again, you would have, if somebody was filing an ethics complaint about someone with this as in violation of this particular tenet, they would have to show and demonstrate that the person failed to enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the state board, and so on and so forth. B is, I'll make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. So this is about doing what's in the best interest of all of the students in your district, not just some of the students, not just any, political group that you might know or special interest group that you may have an interest in. We want you to make sure that you're not basing your decisions on special interest groups, but that you're looking at all of the children that come to Pinelands and saying, we are going, as a board, we will do what's in the best interest of all of them. C is to confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. And this is about making sure that you are working as a policy making body and you're not involved in the administration of those policies, but you're involved in the development of those policies and approving those policies. Then the administration is responsible for coming up with the regulations and for implementing those policies on a day-to-day basis. That's what you have your administrators hired for. One of the reasons anyway. I'll carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. Your job and your role is not to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the school or the running of the school. That's the superintendent's role and her responsibility along with her administrative staff. That has to do with the superintendent makes determinations on snow days, those kinds of things, the calendar will be approved by the board. But reopening of schools was even part of the superintendent and the administrative team's prerogative. So many districts and superintendents and boards worked together on that. And then the board approved it. So to show their community that they were on the same page, but it didn't have to be. That was not something that needed to have board approval. So remember, your role is to see that the district is well run and the schools are well run, but not to run them yourselves. And that can be a fine line sometimes. The next is recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and make no personal promises or take any personal action or private action that may compromise the board. So this is really about making sure that you realize that only the full board has the right to make decisions for the district and for the board and for the schools. Don't make promises or take any personal action that might compromise the board. And it's the board as an entity that directs the superintendent, not individual board members. So the individual board members cannot direct the superintendent. Individual board members cannot direct staff. Only the board itself as an entity can direct the superintendent, and only the superintendent can direct the staff. Okay, the next one is refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of others or friends. Base your decisions on policy, your vision, your mission, and your goals. Everything that you do should be backed up by either by policy or by goal setting that you've already accomplished. And so one of the things that it's not uncommon for board members to do, especially for new board members, is to really kind of go through those policy manuals. I will say that it's a lucky thing to be a new board member today because when I was a board member, first on the board back in the late 90s, I got 4 binders that were 4-inch binders of paper policies. And that was really something. So now you have your policies online. They're usually easily searchable. There's usually a good search engine that's supplied with that. And you can just type in something and the policies will pop up. So don't hesitate to take a look at those policies and make sure that the action items that you're taking at board meetings do reflect the policies that you've already put into place. Okay. And again, don't be swayed by political groups or special interest groups. This is the one, G is the tenet of the Code of Ethics that is most often violated by board members, and sometimes it's done inadvertently. I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools, which if is disclosed would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I'll provide accurate information and in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its schools. So this is really making sure that the board directs the superintendent and the administration to provide information to the community and the progress on the needs of the district and on the goals of the district and how you're moving forward towards those things. Don't discuss confidential matters that involve personnel, students, negotiations. Anything that comes to you in executive session has to stay in executive session. And I loved the commercial years ago that some of you might remember if you're old enough. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And what happens in executive session has to stay in executive session. If somebody is not able to be there because they have a conflict of interest, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, that doesn't mean that you call them up when you're leaving and say, hey, this is what you missed. If they're not there, it's a protection for them as an individual board member. It's a protection for the board and it's a protection for the district. So they might be able to get the information at some point in time when it's no longer confidential, but for whatever reason right now, they could be deemed as voting on something only because it would assist their family member or their relative. And we don't want people to be put in that situation where they could be accused of that. So that's where the conflicts of interest really arise from. It's to protect the individual board member, it's to protect the board, and it's to protect the district itself. So be careful about confidential matters. Try not to talk to them. Don't talk to them about anybody about things that happen in executive session. What happens in exec has to stay in exec. The next is to vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the chief administrative officer, which is your superintendent. So this is one of those situations where the board needs and the superintendent need each other. No recommendations can come to you regarding personnel that don't come from the superintendent. So the superintendent has to make those recommendations. She is the one with the experience, the educational background, and the certification that allows her that authority to be able to make those recommendations. But she has to make those recommendations, but if they're not approved by the board, they will not happen. So the board has to make sure that they're taking into consideration, careful consideration, what the superintendent is recommending. And hopefully you've had conversations beforehand. So if you have, say, a principalship that's coming up, you know, a principal might be leaving. You want to have a conversation with the superintendent, as long as you don't have a conflict of interest in that conversation, as to what kind of a person are we looking for? What are the qualities? What's the educational background we're looking for? What's the experience, you know, range that we're looking for? What kind of certifications do we want this person to have? And then, since you are the representatives of the community, to talk about what you feel as a board would be important in those folks also. What kinds of additional qualities would you like to see those folks? As you can probably imagine, a high school teacher, you're going to be looking for different qualities than you would for a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher. And I know you're a regional high school, so you're not looking for those younger age kids, for teachers for those younger age students. But still, there may be some variation. And one of the other things that you should be looking at when a position becomes available is the job description, because the board is responsible for approving the job descriptions for each position. So you want to make sure that it still is relevant, that it's been revised recently, that if there are new certifications that are needed, that those exist within the job description, and that it really does reflect what this person will be doing. And we're not looking for you to just be rubber stamps, okay? We're looking for you to be able to ask questions and get input, but at the same token, understand that it's the superintendent whose certification is on the line if something goes wrong with a hire, okay? If it was not a legal hire, it's the superintendent certification that will be at risk for that. The next one is support and protect school personnel and proper performance of their duties. And this is about making sure that you're not violating the chain of command. So you have a fabulous chain of command that's listed on your website, and it talks about how a parent would communicate, how they would go through the chain of command, how a staff member would, who they would contact, all the way up through the superintendent and then the board. The board is the court of last resort. And this one is tough because this is where most of you care very deeply about your community and about your students. And you're used to helping people and you want to help people. And so this is one of those instances where once you're a board member, you need to be able to say, I can't help you with this, but I can get you to the people who can help you with this. And so you refer people back to the lowest level in the chain of command because that's where things are most expediently resolved. So if it's a parent with a problem with a teacher, you want to refer them back to the teacher, then maybe to an assistant principal or the principal, then to an assistant superintendent, and then to the superintendent. And then if there hasn't been resolution, it would come to the Board of Education. But resolution also doesn't necessarily mean that the person got what they wanted. It may mean that they understand why they can't get what they wanted. And that's how you support and protect school personnel and proper performance of their duties, in making sure that you maintain personnel matters as confidential, that you're not talking about staff out on the soccer field or out on the flag football team field that you're going to be having now, which is very impressive, and those kinds of things. You want to make sure that all of those things are held in confidence. And the last one is to refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and act only on the complaints at public meetings, only after a failure of an administrative solution. So as I said before, you're going to refer people back through the chain of command, but after you do that, you're going to send the superintendent an email, a text, or a quick phone call and say, I just wanted to let you know, I heard from Mrs. Friedman, her daughter Eve is in second grade, and she's having a problem with the teacher, and she needed some help with that. And I explained to her that I couldn't help her with it, but could get her to the people who could help her, and that I am concerned about her issue. So I wanted to let you know, the superintendent, Dr. Superintendent, so that you would be able to follow up on this if it needs to be followed up on. And that way the superintendent knows that you've done your due diligence in not trying to solve the problem for the person or the parent or the staff member, but you've referred them through the proper chain of command for that. And then if it comes to the board, which it will come to the board as you are the court of last resort, then you will be able to act on it. If you have participated in any way in trying to help the individual navigate through any of that, other than referring them to the chain of command, you'll have to recuse yourself because you've been involved. And it's not your role to be involved at that point. Okay. Any questions on the 10 tenets before I move on to commissioner decisions?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. I can only see a couple of you, so I'm making sure that I wait a good 10 to 20 seconds if somebody is reaching for their unmute button. So one of the commissioner decisions, a couple of them were a board member employed as a teacher in another district failed to disclose income received as the president of that district's association. That was found to be by the SEC as a violation of the financial disclosure statement, and the penalty was a censure. Then another was a teacher parent sent an email to the full board about the superintendent's handling of an incident. A board member intending to email just the board used the reply all function. Never reply all. Never, ever, 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 ever. So in replying all, the parent teacher also received the email, and that included details from the board's executive session discussion of the incident. This board member was found to have violated confidentiality and also the potential to have violated the Open Public Meetings Act, because once you reply all and you've replied all to a quorum of the board, that can constitute a conversation, which constitutes a meeting, which constitutes a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, which has to be advertised and so on and so forth. The penalty recommended by the SEC was a reprimand, and the commissioner hasn't made a decision on that as yet. This one was a humdinger, as my father would have said. A board member posted content on a blog that contained deliberate and repeated and unnecessary attacks of the qualification, salary, and general employment of a tenured teacher in the district. So it was found to be a violation of several of the tenets, C, E, and I. There were gross misrepresentations in the post that were meant to interfere with negotiations, that could be confused by the public. There was a smearing and verbally attacking a staff member in public, which violated E, and it harmed the staff member's ability to properly teach and perform their obligations. So this was really a doozy. The board member argued that his rights as a private citizen and the required disclaimer was used that he was not speaking on behalf of the board. This is the first time that the SEC has come back and said that wasn't enough, because they said that his status as a board member was referenced so many times in the blog, it wasn't convincing to them that he was speaking as a private citizen. So even the fact that we always tell you, if you're making a statement, a public statement on the internet, on social media, you always need to say you're not speaking for the board, you don't have the authority to speak for the board, your opinion doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of the board, and you're speaking as a private citizen. Depending on what you follow that up with, if you're referring to yourself constantly as a board member, the SEC is probably going to find you in violation. Okay. The commissioner, the recommendation for that person was a 6-month suspension. However, the board member lost his reelection appeal. I'm sorry, back on this one. The board member lost his reelection bid in November and was off the board at January's reorganization meeting. So not really sure, there's really, once you're off the board, there's really no teeth to any of this. So that becomes an issue. And that has become an issue in several cases that come before the SEC. The commissioner revoked a district send receive relationship with an out-of-state district, identifying an in-state district instead to receive the district's students. This impacted the board president's child, and the president then fully participated in actions that resulted in the passing of a board resolution to continue that relationship with the out-of-state district, with the tuition to be paid by the district, which they felt was a blatant disregard for the commissioner's decision and a clear and palpable conflict of interest. This was found to be a violation. The penalty was censure, mostly because the board member was off the board already. So the options were limited. But the SEC would have recommended, if the board member hadn't already come off the board, they would have recommended removal. This one, a board member attended an all expenses paid conference offered by a potential vendor that the member introduced to the district based on a pre-existing relationship. This was a violation also. The penalty was a 6-month suspension. The SEC actually was going to remove the board member in an effort to deter other school officials from accepting gifts. The commissioner amended the penalty to a 6-month suspension. The board member is currently appealing, so that goes to the appellate court, but the board member remains suspended during the appeals process. So there's a board resolution to approve the hiring of the architecture firm that you work for. Can you participate in the vote? No. I'm here. I'm seeing heads. The 3 heads that I'm seeing are shaking their heads no. Perfect. No, you may not participate in the vote or the discussion, actually. So the conflicts of interest, where do these come from? So New Jersey statute which is 18A, that has to do with education, says that you need to recuse yourself if there's a benefit to you as a school official or to your immediate family due to a business interest, use of position to secure unwarranted privileges, financial involvement, gift, favor offered with the intent to influence, personal involvement that creates a benefit, or service or employment that may prejudice independent judgment. And the immediate family definition by the SEC, the School Ethics Commission, is a spouse or dependent child residing in the same household. So if you or anybody in your immediate family, spouse or dependent child residing in your household, was going to receive a benefit of any of these 6 areas, you would not be able to participate in the discussion or in the vote on any of those particular matters. Now, the SEC immediate family definition is pretty restricted, right? It's a spouse or dependent child residing in the same household. The accountability regulation, which came about in about 2008, came out as what qualifies as a relative, and you can see this is pretty expansive. So it's a spouse or civil union or domestic partner, parent or step-parent, child, stepchild, son, daughter-in-law, grandparent, grandchild, siblings, stepbrothers, stepsisters, half-brothers, half-sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, or nephews, and often sometimes a cousin. So, and this is whether they're related to the school official or spouse or partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So this really becomes very expansive now. So you have to think about who you have, if you have any of these family members or relatives that work in the school district. And if so, we always recommend that you disclose that to your board attorney so that they can keep a list. As some people might say, well, it would be pretty obvious if you have a family member coming up or a relative coming up on an action item that you would recuse yourself from that. But sometimes you don't know. In my particular instance, when I was on the board, my daughter who was still in school, she had mono in elementary school, and so she needed to be homeschooled for a couple of weeks. As you are probably aware, students are identified by a student ID number, not by their name when you're taking action on a homeschooling for a child that's in your district or a student in the district. So the board attorney came over to me before the meeting and said, I just want you to know that this particular line item, this particular action item in the agenda is for your daughter. So you'll need to recuse yourself on that. And so I did. So it's not always something that's obvious. And it's always good to have your board attorney's input on these things also, because they can provide you, they're the only people that should be providing you with legal advice. So the district has an opening for a guidance counselor, and it would be the perfect job for your nephew who lives 2 towns away. Can your district hire your nephew? Nope.
Nope.
Nope. Thank you. Nope. So you can run for the board if you have relatives or immediate family members working in the district. But once you're on the board, nobody else in your family or relatives can be hired. Okay. So the board is meeting to discuss the superintendent's performance evaluation. Your spouse is an aide in the district. Can you participate in that discussion? Nope. Not at all. So you may not hire a relative of a board member or of the chief school administrator, and there might be some exceptions. So several years ago, when I was working with a district in another part of the state, it was a tiny district. They were looking for a school nurse. They had a couple of people who applied, but the only person who applied who had the actual certification was actually the spouse of one of the board members. So they took that to the executive county superintendent. Each county in the state has an executive county superintendent, or an ECS. We are nothing without our acronyms in education. And said, may I hire this person, even though she is the spouse of a board member? The executive county superintendent asked them to go out and re-advertise for the position and bring back, what the results of that were. It was the same situation. The only person that was qualified that had the right certification was the board member's wife. So the executive county superintendent waived that regulation. They were allowed to hire that person, but then the spouse, the board member, was no longer able to participate in any, couldn't participate in the discussion or the hiring of his wife, obviously, but then couldn't participate in discussion or any decisions or any vote that had anything to do with anybody in the chain of supervision above his wife, which goes all the way up to the superintendent. Okay, so if you have a relative that, so that's the exceptions part where it says maybe exceptions. But if you have a relative that already works in the district, if it's an administrator who has a relative who already works in the district, they can't supervise that person. Somebody else would need to supervise that person. If a board member has a family member working in the district, they can't take part in employment matters concerning the superintendent or any supervisors in the chain of supervision or command between their relative and the superintendent. And then a board member may not take part in the search, selection, or vote to hire the new superintendent or any post-hire evaluations and contract discussions if they have a family member who's working in the district. Okay, and again, you can always ask me, or you can ask one of our attorneys. I always tell my districts and my boards, I'm not an attorney and I've never played one on TV, so I can't provide you even with legal information for the most part. But most of this stuff I do have a pretty good grasp on. But if I can't give you an answer that I'm 100% sure of, I will refer you to one of our attorneys. They can give you legal information, but not legal advice. The only person board members should be taking legal advice from is their board attorney. So this is a grid that gives you kind of an idea. If you have a spouse, a dependent child, a child who's not dependent, or a relative who works in the district, you would not be able to participate in negotiations or to ratify the contract. If you yourself work in another school district, or your spouse works in another district, or a dependent child works in another school district, you wouldn't be able to participate in negotiations, but you may be able to vote to ratify the contract, depending on whether if there's no other conflict, and that's after the memorandum of agreement or the MOA, the salary guides, and the total compensation package has been attained. And then if you have a child who's not a dependent or a relative who works in another district, you probably can participate in negotiations and you probably can vote to ratify the contract. Again, absent the another conflict and when all of those terms that are at the bottom have been attained. However, if you have, if you have heightened, if you're in a heightened position in the union or in the association that you work for in another district, or your family member or relative has a heightened union involvement in the other district, you may not be able to participate in those things as well. So that's where you really have to talk to your board attorney. So the board is voting to approve the memorandum of agreement with the local education association. You're a teacher in another district. Can you participate in the vote? It really depends. It's really going to depend on whether you have heightened union involvement, those kinds of things, okay? Whether the salary guides have been done and the total compensation package, as well as the MOA has been done, or the memorandum of agreement.
And what if you're shared services?
And if you're shared services, that's another situation that you would have to take a look at. I would suggest that you talk to your board attorney. You may want to get an advisory opinion, but typically if there's anybody in the chain of supervision over your family member, if the person is working in both districts, is overseeing both districts, you probably wouldn't be able to participate. Okay,
as the state is encouraging more shared services, they need to look at these regulations because it's really challenging.
It is. And it's, so if you're a board member, you can't hire a family member, or the district can't hire a family member or relative, but you can run for the board and have 5 family members who work in the district. So it doesn't go both ways. And when you think about it, it really is getting difficult because in a lot of instances, the school or the district is the largest employer in the town. Exactly. And so it's not uncommon that family members are linked to the school district or employed by the school district. And we're going to talk
one too. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, that's okay.
Scary one is that they can't advance. You can't go from lunch person to a secretary.
Well, that was only because that was the superintendent. So if you have a family member, so you're on the board now, okay, and you have a family member who works in the district, it does not prevent that person who works in the district from being promoted. It just means you can't have any part of that discussion or vote, okay? So it's not necessarily going to preclude somebody else from advancing. That situation was only because that recommendation of that promotion had to come from the superintendent, and he was related to her.
I know it just seemed like it was just one more level of crazy, like, you know, of an intertwined that you wouldn't necessarily think of. But it could be, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I guess I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what if he was the principal and they wanted the secretary in his office? I mean, it just becomes more complicated.
Mhm. It does. And, you know, please keep in mind, especially, I know that those of you who have been on the board know this, but those of you who are new to the board, these are not Mary Ann Friedman's recommendations or conflicts of interest for you or rules for you. These are not New Jersey School Boards Association's rules for you. This is state legislature that has, defined these things and that has been approved. So they have really been developed to keep somebody from being able to say, for instance, in Ms. Hannadell, in the case of the superintendent with his sister-in-law, well, you only promoted her because she's your sister-in-law. So it keeps people from being able to say that. And I know it's probably little consolation to the sister-in-law who really wanted to be a secretary from, move from being a cafeteria aide or a lunch aide to a secretary. But at the same token, it's really a protection for the individual, for the Board of Education, and for the district. And I know a lot of people think of these conflicts of interest as punishments, and they're really not meant to be that way. It's really meant to be for the protection of the board member, the board, and the district. But I agree, it's getting much more difficult, especially when the state is really promoting shared services and promoting regionalization and consolidation and all of the conflicts then that could generally come from that. It's getting much more difficult. And I think it's something that at some point will have to be addressed. Unfortunately, it's not school boards that would address it. It would have to be addressed through the legislature and the School Ethics Commission. So, but I understand your points. So other bargaining conflicts or other conflicts that may impose themselves on collective bargaining are if you have a family member who's supervised by employees in the unit, if they're not in the unit, but their terms of employment are linked to the unit, and if the immediate family member or relative has heightened union involvement. And so that's where, some of that information really needs to be shared with your board attorney so that he or she can then really advise you on areas to recuse yourself from so you don't get yourself into a pickle, so to speak. And then back in, I think it was probably around 2012, maybe earlier, the SEC came out with, if you were running for the school board and you were endorsed by your local teachers association, you could not participate if you were elected, you could not participate in negotiations for your first year. They found that there were a lot of teachers associations who were endorsing candidates because they didn't want them to be part of negotiations if they should succeed in being elected to the board. And so now the SEC has said, if a candidate has been endorsed by a board, it has not created a financial benefit or financial contribution to that board member, to that candidate, which is being given to influence the board member, they may be able to participate. So now it's more on a case-by-case basis. It's not a hard and fast rule. So that's something to consider also. So we're getting close to the end. So the doctrine of necessity is only to be invoked when the board has to vote on something. And if there's a 9-member board, if 5 people are conflicted, and if it takes a majority of the full membership of the board, which would mean that 5 people had to vote in the affirmative to pass something. So, or vote no to not pass something. So if there aren't enough board members to do the board's, to take care of the board's business and take care of action items from the board, then the board would ask the board attorney to draw up the resolution for the doctrine of necessity at a public board meeting. The board attorney would read off the resolution, and any board member who had a conflict of interest would have to state their conflict, who they are, and what their conflict of interest is. So years ago, I was at a board meeting where they had to invoke the doctrine. And, typically somebody will say, I'm Mary Ann Friedman, my daughter works for, as a teacher in the school. And there were there were 5 board members who had multiple family members who worked in the district. So depending on the size of the district, and some of our districts in New Jersey are fairly, are pretty big, you could have a board member who has a number of people who are employed by the district. And they just have to make that public. And then once that's read into the minutes, then everybody is able to participate in the discussion and the vote. The SEC also said that the formation of a committee, even if it's only one person, can actually be eligible, because a committee doesn't take action. A committee recommends to the board to take action. Only the board can take action. So it's very, very rare that a board will give a committee the authority to do anything other than bring their recommendations to the board. So there can be a committee of just one person. And then 2 non-conflicted members can obtain the assistance of the superintendent, the board, the business administrator, or a consultant to help with negotiations. So that's something that happened too. What was happening was, after some of these new relative definitions came out, there were so many boards that had so many conflicts that the doctrine of necessity was being used over and over again. And the SEC didn't want that to be used except in dire circumstances.
Mary Ann, I have a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's Pat.
Yes.
It's
Hi,
Pat.
Pat.
Is that something that's done each time, each separate event? Or is it something that is done, like the board takes action for, I don't know, the entire year?
No, it would have to be done for each event.
Each event, okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding anyway. Because each thing could be different, and some people who have a conflict some people might have a conflict in the superintendent evaluation and matters pertaining to the superintendent's, personnel decisions regarding the superintendent and negotiations. Somebody else may only have a conflict of interest with negotiations. So each time it would need to be a different resolution brought forth.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So this one is tough because you guys are people, I'm saying you guys, you men and women are people who care deeply about your community and about your students. And you have mostly come up through the ranks of volunteering for the most part. You've been volunteers at the PTA and the PTO, and you're a volunteer now as a board member too. But the SEC doesn't want board members to feel that they're banned from any kind of volunteering in the schools, but they do feel that there are some important considerations to make. So you can volunteer, including holding an executive position with the PTA, PTO, or HSA. We always suggest that you not have any dealings with money. So no collection of money, no distribution of money, no taking money to the bank to deposit, no withdrawing money from a PTA, PTO, or HSA account. Don't deal with money at all.
Or we can give it.
Yes, we can always give it. And then you should refrain from certain activities. So if it's something, so some school districts and even some schools within school districts, some of the schools will have that a class mom is in the building, or a class parent is in the building 2 or 3 times a week. If you were a board member, the SEC would say that's not going to be recommended. However, if your school, where your child is in school or your student is in school, and you're a class mom or a class parent, and they're only asking you to come in once a month, that would probably be fine. So they're looking for infrequent activities and infrequent volunteer activities. And then if you are going to be a volunteer in the schools for a particular day or event, let the superintendent know. Shoot an email to the superintendent. Just wanted to let you know, Mrs. Smith invited me in for Read Across America Day. I'm going to be reading to her 3rd grade class from 10 to 11 o'clock on Tuesday, something like that, just to let them know in advance. And then basically you want to answer these questions. And I think you're all in front of a separate device, so you probably can see this. If you ask yourself these questions and your answers are exactly what the answers are that are in green, you're probably fine. there's probably no conflict with volunteering in that particular situation. If your answers are different, you may be at odds with some of the roles of a school board member. So we always want you to talk to your superintendent and get input from your school district's attorney before you volunteer. Basically, you want to make sure that nobody could perceive you as being enmeshed in the district, providing supervision to students or to staff, or directing students or staff. That would be a huge no-no as a board member, okay? But like I said, you go in to help with the book sale, or the holiday sale or something like that. Just don't take money. You can help kids. Let the superintendent know you're going to be helping kids select books. Those kinds of things. That's fine. Okay, interview committees. This is always a big one too. What the SEC said that 1 or 2 board members could participate in observations of interview committees only if there's an administrative staff that's coordinating their participation and the entire interview process, okay? They also came and said, so that was in 2012. In 2015, the SEC said, we really don't recommend that board members participate in interviews for staff unless it's the superintendent. Okay, we discourage that. And there are narrow circumstances that they've approved those things in. And then also exit interviews. If you see that there's a big turnover happening in your staff, you may say to the superintendent, as a board, we would like you to offer exit interviews to anybody who's leaving, retiring, moving on, going to a different district or whatever. Keep in mind, and then we'd like you to report out on that once or twice a year, what your findings are. Keep in mind that board members cannot be part of those exit interviews, and that the superintendent can't mandate that staff participate in exit interviews. So they can offer them to the staff that's leaving, but they can't make it mandatory that they participate. So, but you can often, if you've got a turnover that you're concerned about as a board or as the superintendent, you may want to do those ask the superintendent to do those exit interviews. It can provide you with some good information that you may want to use in your next negotiations, time frame, or in your next negotiations period. So some things to consider is that we do recommend that you review and develop a list of board members and administrators who have a conflict and review that regularly. Keep in mind that somebody may come onto the board with a family member who's already working in the district, and maybe in June that person retires, or that person has decided to move to another district or whatever, to work at another district. So the conflicts can change. So you may be conflicted at one point as a board member and you may not be in another point. Consult with your board attorney on any ethical issues that come up and to identify conflicted board members and administrators, and then continue to check with school board notes, which is published weekly during the school year anyway, and is distributed electronically to you, because we always keep the newly released advisory opinions and decisions on there that are made public. And then remember that you really need to always be cognizant of your role to provide to make sure that the public has the opportunity to trust you and hold confidence in you as you are overseers of the district, and then reevaluate any existence of potential conflicts. These are the links for the examples that I used throughout the presentation. As I said initially, I'm going to be sending this to you. It's all ready to go. I just have to hit send to Dr. McCooley, to Mr. Brown, to the board president and the vice president. I'm going to ask you to send it to everybody. There will also be several short articles. They're really kind of short, on ethics questions that are common ethics questions that are asked of our attorneys, and also the acknowledgement sheet. If you can print that out, print your name on it, sign it, and put today's date, which is March 16th, 2021. And thank you for all that you do for all of your students and for your communities. I know this has been an unprecedented time, and board members and administrators and teachers are not being thanked enough, in my opinion anyway, for all that you're doing to keep your kids safe and your staff safe, and for keeping teaching and learning ongoing. So thank you for everything that you've been doing for all of your students and staff and community members. And do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mary Ann.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mary Ann. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys too.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Greatly
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thanks, Tommy. Take care. Stay safe and stay healthy, everybody. If you have any questions after you receive all of the plethora of stuff I'm going to send to you, please don't hesitate to reach out, give me a call, or shoot me an email, okay? And please stay safe and stay well.
Have a good night.
Thank
Mary.
you. You
All
too.
right, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for your time.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Who was the first one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't get the first motion.
Oh, sorry, Nick. I didn't. Who was the first motion? I heard Karen. Who else? Kim? Okay.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting at 8:37 PM, please say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Opposed? Thank you, guys. That motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. As a reminder to the public, the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be Tuesday, April 27th, 5:30 PM executive, 6 PM regular session. Have a great night and thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Have a
Bye.
good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
guys.
Good night.